Have you ever looked in the mirror after turning 60 and suddenly noticed that your hair seems a little grayer than it was a few years ago? Maybe you've even found yourself wondering whether it's simply time to reach for the hair dye again. And honestly, for most people, gray hair is a completely normal part of getting older. It happens because the tiny pigment-producing cells inside our hair follicles gradually become less active over time. But here's where things get interesting. Your hair color is not determined by age alone. Nutrition and overall health can also influence the condition and growth of your hair. That doesn't mean every gray hair is a warning sign, and it certainly doesn't mean that taking one vitamin will magically turn naturally gray hair back to its original color. Claims like that are simply too good to be true. However, there is one nutrient that deserves a closer look, especially as we get older: vitamin B12. B12 plays several important roles throughout the body, and when someone is genuinely deficient, correcting that deficiency can be important for overall health. Some research has also found an association between B12 deficiency and premature graying, although that is very different from proving that B12 can reverse normal age-related gray hair. So the real question isn't, what vitamin will make my gray hair disappear? It's a much more useful question. Could changes in your hair sometimes give you a reason to look a little closer at your nutrition and health? And if you're over 60, knowing the difference could save you from wasting money on unnecessary supplements while helping you recognize something that actually deserves attention. Before we talk about the vitamin, though, you need to understand what actually makes hair lose its color in the first place. To understand gray hair, we first need to understand what gives your hair its color in the first place. Deep inside each hair follicle are specialized cells that produce a natural pigment called melanin. Think of melanin as the paint your body uses to give each strand its color. The more pigment those cells produce, the darker your hair tends to look. As pigment production decreases, newly growing hair can appear gray, silver, or eventually white. Now imagine each hair follicle as a tiny paint factory. When that factory is working efficiently, it keeps producing enough pigment to color the new hair. But as the years pass, the factory may gradually become less productive. The pigment-producing cells can become less active, and eventually they may produce much less color than they did when you were younger. This is one of the main reasons gray hair becomes more noticeable as we age. But age isn't the only factor. Genetics play a major role as well. That's why one person may start seeing gray hairs in their 30s or 40s, while another may keep much of their natural color well into their 60s or beyond. Your family history can influence when this process begins and how quickly it progresses. There are also biological processes happening inside the follicle over time, including oxidative stress, which refers to an imbalance between damaging molecules and the body's ability to manage them. These processes may contribute to changes in the pigment-producing cells, although normal aging and genetics remain major factors. And here's something reassuring: gray hair by itself is usually not a disease. Seeing more silver strands in your 60s does not automatically mean something is wrong with your health. You may also have heard that if you pull out one gray hair, several more will grow back. That's a myth. Removing one hair doesn't turn neighboring follicles gray. Each follicle has its own pigment-producing process. So gradual graying is usually part of the normal aging story. But there is another part of this story that becomes especially interesting after 60. What happens when the body doesn't have enough of a nutrient it needs to function properly? Now we come to the vitamin at the center of this conversation: vitamin B12. B12 may not be the magic answer to gray hair that some headlines make it sound like, but it is an important nutrient that deserves attention, especially as we get older. Your body uses B12 for several essential jobs. It helps make healthy red blood cells, supports DNA production, and plays an important role in keeping your nervous system functioning properly. Think of B12 as one of the small maintenance workers your body depends on every day. You may not notice what it is doing when you have enough of it, but if your body doesn't have enough, several systems can eventually be affected. And here's why this becomes particularly relevant after 60. Some older adults may consume less of certain B12-containing foods, while others may have difficulty absorbing B12 properly. Certain digestive conditions, previous gastrointestinal procedures, and some medications can also affect B12 status in some people. So nutritional health isn't always as simple as saying, "I eat a healthy diet, therefore I must be getting everything I need." But let's be very clear about something. If you're seeing more gray hair in your 60s, that does not automatically mean you're deficient in B12. And taking B12 doesn't guarantee that naturally gray hair will return to its original color. Normal age-related graying is strongly influenced by genetics and the natural aging process. However, some research has reported an association between vitamin B12 deficiency and premature graying. That finding is interesting, but it doesn't prove that B12 supplements can reverse ordinary age-related gray hair. There is an important difference between correcting a genuine deficiency and taking extra vitamins simply because you want a cosmetic result. Imagine your body as a car. If the engine is low on a necessary fluid, restoring it to the appropriate level may help the engine function properly. But pouring in more and more fluid doesn't automatically make the car perform better. Your body works in a similar way. Nutrients are necessary, but more isn't always better. So the goal of this video isn't to convince you to rush out and buy a bottle of B12. The goal is to help you understand when B12 might actually matter, who may be more likely to have a deficiency, and why identifying the real problem is more useful than guessing. And this brings us to a much more important question. What if the real issue isn't your gray hair at all, but a deficiency you haven't noticed yet? And that raises an important question. How would you know if your B12 level actually deserves attention? So, how would you know if B12 actually deserves your attention? There isn't one symptom that can tell you, this is definitely a B12 deficiency. In fact, many of the signs can be caused by completely different health issues. But when several changes appear together, or when something feels unusual and persistent, they can be a reason to talk with your healthcare professional. One of the most common clues can be persistent tiredness. We're not talking about being sleepy after a poor night's sleep. We're talking about feeling unusually drained for weeks or months, even when you've had reasonable rest. B12 deficiency can contribute to anemia, meaning the blood isn't carrying oxygen as effectively as it should, which can leave a person feeling exhausted. Another possible clue is weakness or noticeably reduced energy. You may find ordinary activities, such as walking around the house, shopping, or climbing stairs, feel harder than they used to. Again, this doesn't automatically point to B12. Many conditions can cause weakness. But a persistent change deserves attention rather than being automatically blamed on age. A third possible sign is pale-looking skin. Changes in blood cells associated with B12 deficiency can sometimes affect skin appearance, but skin color can naturally vary for many reasons, so this is not something you should use to diagnose yourself. Then, there are numbness and tingling, especially in the hands or feet. This one is particularly important because B12 plays a role in normal nerve function. Some people describe it as pins and needles, burning, or a strange sensation that seems difficult to explain. A fifth clue can involve balance or coordination. If you suddenly feel less steady when walking or notice changes in coordination, don't simply assume it's part of getting older. There are many possible causes, and some deserve medical attention. The sixth involves memory, concentration, or thinking changes. B12 deficiency can affect the nervous system, although these symptoms can also have many other explanations. Persistent or concerning cognitive changes should always be discussed with a healthcare professional. And finally, there can be changes in the tongue or mouth, such as a sore or unusually smooth tongue, or other persistent mouth discomfort. Now imagine a 68-year-old who has been unusually tired and occasionally feels tingling in his feet. For months he tells himself, "I'm just getting older." Eventually, he mentions it during a medical appointment. That conversation doesn't automatically mean he has a B12 deficiency. It simply gives his clinician a reason to consider the possibilities and decide whether testing or further evaluation makes sense. That's the important lesson. Don't diagnose yourself from a YouTube video, but don't automatically dismiss persistent changes as aging either. And now comes the part many people over 60 never realize. Sometimes the issue isn't how much B12 you eat, it's whether your body can actually absorb it. Here's something many people don't realize. Getting enough vitamin B12 isn't always just about eating foods that contain it. Your body also has to be able to absorb and use that vitamin properly. Vitamin B12 naturally occurs in foods such as fish, meat, eggs, and dairy products, and it can also be found in fortified foods. But once B12 enters your body, the digestive system has an important job to do before that vitamin can become useful. Think of it like having an important package delivered to your home. Ordering the package is one step, but the package still needs to reach the correct address, get through the door, and actually be received. In much the same way, eating B12-containing food is only part of the process. Your digestive system needs to release and absorb the vitamin so your body can use it. Your stomach plays an important role in this process. It produces substances that help separate B12 from food and prepare it for absorption. Later in the digestive tract, B12 is absorbed with the help of a protein called intrinsic factor. You don't need to remember that name, but understanding the basic idea is useful. The body has a specific system for getting B12 from your meal into your bloodstream. Certain stomach or intestinal conditions can interfere with this process. Previous stomach or intestinal surgery can sometimes matter as well. Some medications, including certain medicines used for diabetes or to reduce stomach acid, may also affect B12 status in some people, particularly with long-term use. And of course, dietary intake matters too. Someone who consumes very few animal-derived or fortified foods may have a different B12 intake than someone who regularly eats these foods. But there's an important point here. Being over 60 does not automatically mean you have a B12 deficiency. Age is not a diagnosis. Your diet, medical history, medications, digestive health, and symptoms all matter. That's why testing and professional evaluation are more useful than guessing. If there's a genuine reason to suspect deficiency, a healthcare professional can decide whether testing makes sense and what the appropriate next step should be. So, before buying a bottle of supplements, there are a few common mistakes you should know about. Before you decide that gray hair means you need a particular vitamin, there are 5 common mistakes worth knowing about. Understanding these can help you avoid unnecessary supplements, unrealistic expectations, and missed health concerns. The first mistake is assuming every gray hair means you have a vitamin deficiency. Gray hair is extremely common as we age, and genetics play a major role in when it appears. If you're 60, 65, or 70, and gradually seeing more silver strands, that alone usually isn't a reason to assume something is wrong. Your hair may simply be following the normal biology of aging. The second mistake is believing that one vitamin can reverse all age-related gray hair. This is where online health claims can become misleading. You may see promises that a particular vitamin will bring your original hair color back. But normal age-related graying is a complex process involving genetics, aging, and changes in the pigment-producing cells of the hair follicle. There is no guarantee that taking B12 or any other vitamin will restore naturally gray hair. The third mistake is taking large amounts of supplements without knowing whether you actually need them. It's easy to think, if this vitamin is important, more must be better. But that's not how nutrition works. Your body needs nutrients within appropriate ranges. If you suspect a deficiency, finding out whether one actually exists is far more useful than simply taking increasingly larger doses. The fourth mistake is focusing so much on your hair that you forget about the rest of your health. Healthy hair doesn't come from one magic ingredient. Your body needs adequate protein, a varied diet, enough essential nutrients, and good overall health. If your meals are consistently poor, but you're taking a handful of hair supplements, you're focusing on the wrong end of the problem. And the fifth mistake is using your hair as a substitute for medical evaluation. Hair color can't tell you whether your B12 level is normal. It can't diagnose anemia, thyroid problems, or other health conditions. If you have persistent fatigue, numbness, weakness, unusual hair loss, or other concerning changes, those symptoms deserve proper evaluation. So remember the difference between myth and fact. Gray hair does not automatically mean you're unhealthy. More vitamins don't automatically mean better health, and a supplement should never be viewed as a replacement for a nutritious diet or appropriate medical care. But B12 isn't the only piece of the puzzle. If you're over 60, your hair needs more than one nutrient. But B12 isn't the only piece of the puzzle. If you're over 60 and you're thinking about healthier hair, it's important to look beyond a single vitamin and look at your overall nutrition. One of the biggest building blocks is protein. Hair itself is largely made from a protein called keratin, so your body needs an adequate supply of protein to support normal hair growth and maintenance. Foods such as eggs, fish, poultry, dairy products, beans, and lentils can all contribute protein, depending on your dietary preferences and health needs. Then, there's iron. Iron helps your body make hemoglobin, a protein in red blood cells that carries oxygen throughout the body. When someone has an iron deficiency, hair shedding can sometimes become part of the picture. But that doesn't mean everyone with thinning hair should immediately take an iron supplement. Too much iron can also be harmful, which is why identifying the actual problem matters. Folate is another nutrient involved in normal cell division and red blood cell production. Since hair follicles are constantly producing new cells, adequate nutrition supports their normal activity. You may also hear about vitamin D when discussing hair health. Vitamin D is involved in many functions throughout the body, and researchers continue to study its relationship with different hair conditions. But again, an association doesn't automatically mean that taking extra vitamin D will solve a particular hair problem. Then there's zinc, a mineral involved in many processes, including normal cell growth and repair. Severe nutritional deficiencies can affect hair health, but supplementation should be based on actual need rather than guesswork. And of course, B12 remains important because of its role in blood cells and the nervous system, as we've already discussed. But here's the distinction I really want you to remember. Gray color and hair health are not exactly the same thing. You can have completely gray hair and still have healthy, strong hair follicles, and someone can have dark hair while dealing with a nutritional deficiency or another health issue affecting their hair. So don't judge your overall health by the color of your hair. Think about the bigger picture: your diet, your energy, your symptoms, your lifestyle, and how your body is functioning. So if vitamins aren't magic hair color restorers, what can you realistically do if you're over 60 and want healthier hair? So, if there isn't a magic vitamin that can simply erase age-related gray hair, what can you actually do to support healthier hair and better nutrition after 60? The answer is much more practical than most people expect. Instead of searching for one miracle ingredient, think about building a strong foundation. The first part is getting enough quality protein. Your hair is largely made from a protein called keratin, and your body needs adequate protein for many repair and maintenance processes. That doesn't mean you need an expensive protein powder. Simple foods can contribute, including eggs, fish, poultry, dairy products, beans, and lentils. Your individual needs can vary, especially if you have kidney disease or other medical conditions, so it's always reasonable to discuss your protein intake with your healthcare professional when necessary. The second part is building a nutrient-dense, varied diet. Instead of asking, "What's the one food I should eat for my hair?" ask a better question. Am I giving my body a variety of nutrients throughout the week? Different foods provide different nutrients. Vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, lean proteins, dairy or suitable alternatives, nuts, seeds, fish, and other nutrient-rich foods can all contribute to a balanced eating pattern. Your goal isn't perfection, it's variety and consistency. The third part is staying physically active. Exercise won't turn gray hair back to its original color, but regular movement can support cardiovascular health, metabolic health, strength, balance, and overall well-being. And when you're supporting your whole body, you're creating a healthier environment for all the tissues that depend on good nutrition and normal circulation. The fourth part is reviewing your health when something doesn't seem right. If you have persistent fatigue, numbness, unusual weakness, digestive problems, dietary restrictions, or concerns about medications affecting nutrient levels, don't simply start taking multiple supplements. Talk with your healthcare professional. They can look at the bigger picture and determine whether testing or another evaluation makes sense. And here's the mindset I want you to remember. Don't build your health strategy around your mirror. Build it around what is happening inside your body. You may not be able to control when your hair turns gray, but you can make choices that support your nutrition and overall health. And there's one final mistake that can make all of this advice much less useful, assuming that every change in your hair is harmless. Now, there's an important distinction we need to make. Gradually getting more gray hair as you move through your 60s is usually a normal part of aging, but not every change in your hair should automatically be dismissed as just getting older. For example, if you suddenly experience dramatic hair loss, that's worth discussing with a healthcare professional. The same is true if your hair begins changing rapidly without an obvious explanation, or if you develop patchy areas of hair loss rather than the gradual thinning or graying you might expect with age. Your scalp can also give you useful information. Persistent redness, inflammation, sores, unusual scaling, itching, or irritation shouldn't simply be ignored, particularly if these changes continue or become worse. And pay attention when hair changes occur alongside other symptoms. If you're experiencing significant fatigue, unusual weakness, numbness, tingling, balance problems, or other neurological changes at the same time, it's important to look beyond your hair. Those symptoms can have many different causes, and only a proper medical evaluation can help determine what's actually happening. The same applies if you're concerned that your diet, digestive health, medications, or another health issue could be affecting your nutritional status. If you're wondering whether you might be deficient in B12 or another nutrient, testing and professional guidance are much more useful than trying to diagnose yourself based on your hair. And this is where I want to reassure you. Don't panic and don't self-diagnose. Get the right information. Most gray hair is not a medical emergency. You don't need to become anxious every time you see another silver strand in the mirror. The goal is simply to recognize when a change is unusual, persistent, or accompanied by other symptoms. Your hair can be one small part of the health picture, but it should never be the entire picture. Now let's bring everything together because the most important lesson here isn't actually about gray hair. So what should you actually do with everything we've talked about? Keep it simple. First, don't assume that gray hair means something is wrong. If your hair has gradually become grayer as you've gotten older, that is usually a normal part of aging and genetics. Second, don't expect one vitamin to reverse normal aging. B12 is an important nutrient, but it isn't a guaranteed treatment for ordinary age-related gray hair. The goal is healthy nutrition, not a miracle cure. Third, pay attention to what's happening beyond your hair color. Persistent fatigue, weakness, numbness, tingling, balance problems, unusual hair loss, or other unexplained changes may deserve a conversation with your healthcare professional. Fourth, build your diet around variety and nutrient-rich foods. Include appropriate sources of protein, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, and foods that provide important vitamins and minerals. Fifth, if you have symptoms or risk factors that could point toward B12 deficiency, ask your healthcare professional whether testing is appropriate. Testing is much more useful than guessing. Sixth, avoid taking large amounts of supplements simply because you heard they're good for hair. More isn't automatically better, and unnecessary supplementation can sometimes create problems of its own. And finally, if your hair suddenly changes dramatically, becomes patchy, or changes alongside other concerning symptoms, don't simply write it off as aging. Get it checked. Most importantly, focus on your health, not just your appearance. You may not be able to stop every gray hair from appearing, but you can make informed choices about the health of the body underneath it. And if you remember only one thing from this video, let it be this. So, if you remember only one thing from today's conversation, remember this. Gray hair after 60 is usually a normal part of aging, not automatically a sign that something is wrong. Vitamin B12 is important for your overall health, and if you genuinely have a deficiency, identifying and correcting it matters. But don't chase miracle claims or assume a supplement will reverse normal age-related gray hair. Pay attention to your overall health, eat well, stay active, and discuss unusual symptoms with your healthcare professional. If you found this helpful, like the video, subscribe for more evidence-based healthy aging advice, and comment below. Have you noticed major changes in your hair after 60? And share this video with someone you love. Healthy aging isn't about fearing change, it's about understanding it.